We went from a undifferentiated digital agency into this strategy, creatively led brand agency. So we said, let's be really conscious and really intentional about what we want to do.
We're driven by emotion as much as anything as well, aren't we? Like, want people to feel things when people come to us.
We wanted this to be about emotion and connection and people.
There was an idea that Woven wanted to look and feel like the clients we wanted to attract, luxury, high-end. Yeah. But we've had this internal debate for a while, like, as long as they've kind of got the right ambition or attitude that we also share.
The evolution of digitals, it's come a long way, hasn't it? I think that experiential element to digital is so much more important now than it ever has been.
Not just execution, it's not just brand, it's both of those coming together. Woven ties into that really nicely because it's about everything working together.
Yeah. From love at first sight to partners for life, we just want people to say, oh my God, that looks amazing. In a nutshell, that is Woven. It's what we exist for, to make brands work beautifully. Woven is now just over 8 years old as a brand. The business that I joined 8 years ago is 20 years old in total. But I think, like a lot of businesses that came up through that sort of early days of digital, what was then Inc. Digital Agency had become a little bit undifferentiated.
Yep.
There wasn't really a clear proposition. And in fact, I remember when I first started working with Helen, we put kind of the proposition up on the wall. What is the proposition? And it was almost, we will do almost anything for almost anybody at any price. It was pretty undifferentiated.
Heck of a proposition, that.
Yeah. So not perfectly positioned. And so I think we knew that wasn't a sustainable way to go forward. So we and I, again, from my previous experience, I knew that we needed a real proposition. You know, the market had become super competitive. There's loads of great agencies around, lots of people doing digital in all kinds of different ways. So this all things to all people sort of proposition was just not going to cut it anymore at that point in time. So, you know, 2016, 17, the market's already fairly mature. So we consciously went looking for a full rebrand. You know, we wanted to move away from this name, which again was one of those accidental names that people just almost pick out of a hat.
Yeah.
And stay with for 20 years.
Stay with for 20 years. So we said, let's be really conscious and really intentional about what we want to do. And to be honest, there's a couple of things in the portfolio at that point in time which were real standouts. So the business was already working with Princess Yachts. It was working with a couple of property companies, doing some sort of reasonably high-end stuff. And this work and those clients were so different to almost everything else in the portfolio. Different kind of quality, different kind of scale. And also in this area where we were winning awards for that sort of stuff, even back then. Really great, beautiful, creative, glowing testimonials from people like Kieran at Princess. And really, that was the root of it. It was kind of like, this is our best work. This is the stuff we love doing. And this is what really gets us more kudos and awareness in the industry. So let's build a proposition around this. And I think in sort of like, as we said, 2016, 17, we saw an opportunity to create a slightly different type of agency, not completely unique, but the idea was, can we take our 20 odd years of digital experience, you know, we're as good as anybody at this stuff, we've been here since it started, but can we wrap that in this really sort of beautiful high-end kind of creative that you often, certainly back then, maybe more so today, but certainly at that point, you didn't really see digital agencies turning work out like that.
They were the execution arm.
Yeah.
The creative was done elsewhere.
It was
branding was done elsewhere.
Yeah.
It was very colouring in boxes, that sort of digital, you know, so things like UX and usability were driving the conversation a lot, as which is entirely appropriate in, say, e-commerce for Amazon or Tesco Direct or something like that. Yes, you want super simple usability, but these weren't really like brand experiences. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we could step into that high ticket world, that high net worth world, luxury premium products, and deliver sort of really amazing digital experiences. And maybe we'd have to break some of the rules of usability in a strict sense in order to do that.
Well, that's still a debate we have now, though, isn't it, with clients? How efficacy versus beauty is still a debate. And when you start with a brand, it's often about beauty, and efficacy still comes into it. But when you then get to more narrowing down that funnel a little bit and getting to execution, it's about, well, how does the website make people buy something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But our clients aren't always about that. I mean, I'm probably getting too far ahead now, but it's
no. I mean, it's a useful kind of parallel to the conversation, because it's kind of to the heart of what we're talking about, isn't it? And yeah, I think we'll probably talk about how we do that and why we do that, and some of the things we did, say, for Ducati, etc. In terms of explaining their proposition in a way that really suits the product and the target audience. But yeah, so we wanted a real brand. I mean, having gone through this process of picking a name out of a hat and being stuck with this thing that didn't really have a story, it was like, if we're going to go out and do this for people, then we need a brand. We need something that has a story, it has a purpose. So we applied our brand model that we take to our clients to our own business, which, as anyone can imagine, trying to do that in a creative agency or a branding agency is fun, because everybody's got an opinion, obviously. So
fun.
Fun. It was fun. It was a process.
Torturous.
Slash torturous. But we did it properly. We started out with core values. We really looked at what we believed in as a business. We looked at what are the underpinnings of this, what drives us, what motivates us. We went through a brand archetype process to figure out, again, from a storytelling perspective, what kind of business do we want to be? We could have been a creator brand, we could have been a sage brand, we could have been a magician brand. It's about transformation. But we landed on this idea that, the thing we loved was those testimonials and those kind of relationships that we built for 8 years at that point with Princess. So, we landed on that lover archetype, this idea of something that's very sensual, again, which fits with that luxury world. It's very relationship based. So that was a kind of one of the first stakes in the ground, I think, was to get that established. This is what kind of people we are.
Well, I think that's interesting about that, though, is that I think a lot of people see strategy or brand identity as this kind of wishy-washy type theoretical thing that exists in the ether somewhere. But one of our things is to try and make that as real as possible and have an actual direct output.
Yeah.
And if we can't do that for ourselves, then we can't do that for our clients. It's almost like we're a case study for them and how we operate.
Yeah,
from
precisely.
naming through to the people we have on board, the values we have. Those things don't just go away and sit in a drawer somewhere and gather dust. They kind of direct everything that we do. And if we can't do that ourselves, then it's a bit of a run-do, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just underpins everything that we do then. It's sort of driven from strategy is not just a sort of low-lying thing that just happens in the background. It's fed through every sort of element that we do, and I think that's important from our perspective, that we get it right for ourselves, and then we can translate that across into our brand from people just landing on our website. They get a sense of who we are just from straight away, and I think you do that. And I think that we're driven by emotion as much as anything as well, aren't we? Like, want people to feel things when people come to us. And I think quite often that's missing with the brands that work with us. So it's quite an exciting project and process to do, is to get that emotion back into things. We're still underpinned by things like UX and things like that. We've certainly got the...
But they become quite executional, don't they?
Exactly,
that's an output for a particular reason, but it's still anchored in. I think your point about emotion is absolutely the fundamental piece of it, isn't it? Because if there's one thing we see in the brands that do come to us, is that they've had an intellectual kind of branding exercise. They've got some typefaces and some fonts and some color schemes, but very often they don't have that emotional depth.
How does it translate?
That's, again, we're going to segue into talking about brands with a soul. And and we've got this process that we use, this language of soulmates. How can we find the soul of a brand? How can we connect it to people that feel the same sort of way?
But it started with that archetype, though, and that's what we put at the core of what we do. And at Woven, and that led into naming, it led into the kind of people we hire, the kind of stuff we want to do.
So back to the kind of Woven story, we got the archetype, we got this sense of, and it just fell into place, because you look at other brands that are of that sort of nature. And again, as we said, we looked at Haagen-Dazs, we looked at Christian Dior, we looked at the way their logo types are and the kind of typography and white space and sort of aesthetic. And it was everything that we were doing for these sort of brands. So we felt pretty comfortable that we got that. And then, as you say, we didn't even have a name at this point. So we went hunting for a name that could symbolize some of these ideas. And we just had a list of things that came out of that exercise that we just didn't want to look too digital. We wanted this to be about emotion and connection and people. So we didn't want it to look digital. So we knew we didn't want it to be cold and mathematical. We wanted it to be warm. We wanted it to be about connectedness, connecting people. So we had all these ideas, handmade even, that craftsmanship to it. So we went off and we had, again, walls full of ideas, walls full of potential names, and narrowed them down and narrowed them down and narrowed them down till we ended up with a small subset that were effectively all in the same space. We had things like tapestry.
Yeah.
It was a runner, but I think someone already had that. I think there was an agency.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's part of the difficulty. If you search any single noun or almost adjective, there'll be an agency associated with that these days.
And then we found Woven, and Woven was available, and we really liked it because we felt that it encapsulated all of those ideas. It brought all of that together. And then, just as a sort of added little sprinkle of magic, we were currently working in an old cloth mill in Halifax, which is a very famous cloth town in the north of England that has the Peace Hall, which was a cloth trading square in the middle of town, famous across Europe at the time. So in 4 or 5 letters, Woven, 5 letters, I think. Not very good at spelling. It's never been my strong point. But in 5 letters, we managed to encapsulate this entire sort of world of ideas of connectedness and warmth and handmade and craft. And we also managed to give a little subtle nod to our kind of 15 years previous experience working in Halifax and coming from that background. So we felt that made a really nice kind of story. We resisted the temptation to go too far down the literal woven thing. So we didn't want to start talking about threads and all of that all the time. But it was just nice to have that sat in the background. And some subtle nods. We even then got all kind of esoteric and start talking about the fabric of the universe and sacred geometry. And
talks about Fibonacci numbers. How we're going to design our website using golden ratios.
But we were talking about, classic design. We were talking about what makes things beautiful.
And stand the test of time.
Yeah. And we got this idea, that line came along pretty soon. We make brands work beautifully was the proposition. Again, a nod to the digital, making things work. So there's an efficiency and a efficacy about it. But we want to wrap it in this kind of beautiful.
I think that does sum it up pretty nice. And then also we had this term about brand engagement, didn't we? That was, so we're not a digital agency, we're not necessarily a brand agency either, although we can do both of those things. But if we wrap it together and we put it across every touch point, which not a lot of agencies could do at the time, probably still can't do so well. Social, digital, email campaigns, print ads, above the line, below the line. That engagement is, again, Woven ties into that really nicely because it's about everything working together and being tied together. And actually, when we have our conversations with clients, they use that word all the time. We need to weave this into that. And then they'll say, oh, that's you, isn't it? It's like, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And this one was playing it back to us that it's turned into the right name.
A kind of little subconscious pun, hasn't it? That our clients are using.
And try not to sort of have a nice smug smile when they say it. But
they often say, oh, I see what you've done there.
That's when they get it.
But we ended up with this line as well, didn't we? From love at first sight to partners for life, which again is just this idea of acquisition, retention,
delight,
but sort of framed through this language of the lover archetype. So that's how it sort of colours the brand, and that's how we rolled that forward into a kind of elegant, beautiful, high-end sort of visual treatment. Again, really throwing out a lot of what our competitors were doing at that time. We did a competitor audit. We looked at everyone's site, and they got these kind of typical digital agency boxy sites with transitions and pop-ups and overlays. And we just deliberately chose not to use any of those tricks. And we said, let's just make something that looks like a coffee table book. So let's make our website almost like we're flicking through this beautiful coffee table book, and we just want people to say, oh my God, that looks amazing.
It's an experience, isn't it? I feel like that's why it's stood the test of time a lot over the years as well. It hasn't really changed too much. We've made the odd tweak, obviously, but I think it does give that essence of who we are quite nicely, and it isn't just a bog standard sort of digital agency or brand agency. It's got good crossover, I think. It's that coffee table book, Matt. You want to pick it up, you want to go back to it. So hopefully that comes across anyway.
I think it did, but I started just with ink, and we were just transitioning into Woven. And then, so I've been here 7.5 years, and I think you came in just as it became Woven, didn't it, really? And I think, again, if you talk about how this stuff could be theoretical. It could all be sort of like a bit airy-fairy. Actually, we looked for people, I think probably looked for someone like me, someone like you, who could come in and actually translate that, articulate it in a way that we weren't doing as Inc. Digital, I think.
Yeah.
So once you've got that vision, once you've kind of created an archetype, whatever you put at the heart of your brand and a direction, a proposition, whatever you want to call it, then you've got to get the right people in and work with those people. So, we've been here a good number of years, and I think that's testament to the strength of the vision and the idea of behind Woven, and hopefully getting, some good work out there, really.
Well, it is interesting whenever you take something like that, and I've heard people say, it's easier to kill something and start again than it is to turn some, that kind of organizational change, because it was a massive change. We went from a undifferentiated digital agency into this kind of strategy, creatively led brand agency. Very much brand first, strategic kind of thinking at the heart of everything. And I remember saying it probably took us at least 3 years to make that transition fully work. And then it's probably taken us another 5 years from that to the point we are today to gain traction in the market with that proposition, to the extent that, today we've got people like Embraer, giant kind of business coming all the way from Brazil. I keep saying from the other side of the planet to come and hire, Woven to deliver their global digital
relatively
strategy.
Small company, aren't we? And
certainly to be playing on that world stage. And we've got several multi-billion-dollar clients, clients in the States. We've just done the core rebrand for HBI.
As well as a couple of other brands for them, and Technomark and whatnot. So we're attracting, I think there was an idea that Woven wanted to look and feel like the clients we wanted to attract, luxury, high-end. Yeah. But we've had this internal debate for a while, like that would be great, and it's lovely when those people come along and we attract that kind of person, that kind of brand. But actually we do just want to attract, we've got this term design conscious, haven't we, that we've talked about, and that could actually be a plastics manufacturer in North Carolina, as long as they've kind of got the right ambition or attitude that we also share, as long as we know that their work, what we transform them into, would look good in our case studies. They have to have that shared ambition, I think, but they could almost be from anywhere. It just so happens we've attracted quite a lot of luxury clients because of how we sound, and we've purposefully engineered that. But it doesn't mean we're just that.
Yeah, what's really interesting, as you say, once you take that sort of thinking almost out of that sort of luxury space, because in the luxury space, it's sort of de facto, isn't it? It's everybody's at that level and it has to be there. But you take that sort of level of attention to brand, to storytelling, to creative output, and take that to a plastics manufacturer in North Carolina.
Unexpected,
and they go from being a also ran practically invisible business to easily the most kind of brand-led and most interesting looking and visually impressive looking business in their sector by an order of magnitude.
Hopefully, anyway.
Absolutely.
Site launches soon, everybody. Keep an eye out. So it's not just the premium space, although we have been lucky enough to work with a few of those, and it's always like. But we talk about like luxury brands actually having that as a standard, almost hygiene factor, but a lot of them aren't though. We've sort of done a few audits of the boat industry, the bike industry, housing industry, even luxury retail, and a lot of them just they do fall a bit flat. And you're surprised actually, you're taken a bit aback by these household names that have almost kind of let this thing drift a little bit. Maybe they got the brand, but they're not articulating it in an interesting way. The digital experience isn't very good, and most of the brands I think we've audited have fallen short, actually. Perhaps 10-20% are doing a really good job. Another 10 or 20% are doing an okay job. 50-60% not are struggling.
It's astonishing, isn't it? As you say, we've done market audits where we've just gone out and looked at an entire sector and said, because there are some phenomenal brands, and they've got heritage and pedigree, and they did so many things so well. Like the products are often amazing, and that's kind of what the brand's been built around that. And maybe they've done traditional media incredibly well in the past. Maybe they've had amazing TV ads, maybe they've done great PR, all those kind of things. So those sort of brand fundamentals are often in place, and they're often done really well. And it's that thing about the digital part of that, like this last 25, 30 years, they've just not done it very well. So, whereas they might go and fit out a store and they might spend millions on store fit out and in-store experience, they've got this website that almost looks like the Amazon of boats, or
it doesn't translate.
Yeah.
There's no connection between it.
Yeah.
I think it's the evolution of digital's, it's come a long way, hasn't it? I think that experiential element to digital is so much more important now than it ever has been. And you've got to get some cut through on these channels, haven't you? And I think some people maybe have took their eye off the balls. They're often quite expensive, but they probably put as much into a show, for example.
Oh.
And they put the emphasis on other means and other channels, and digital sometimes overlooked.
It's a laggard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a laggard, and it's not an easy transition to get that up to speed. But sometimes it is just a tweak of how you're using your brand or how you express yourselves, and sometimes they just miss the connection of the dots. Has kind of missed somewhere along the lines, and I think our job as creatives is to kind of add those together and make brands. So quite often we don't actually overhaul brands verbatim. We're not doing a complete rebrand on some of these. We just sort of give them the tools to make them communicate much more efficiently, definitely. I think, and drive that emotional kind of journey, I think. And these spaces are just, they're a touch of your hands, aren't they now? You can get them up as you need.
Yeah.
So it's important that they're thought about as much as that exhibition that's coming up in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
It
goes back to the guidelines being done. They spend ages on guidelines. We all do tone of voice documents. We get the typeface right.
It's true.
And then you hand it over, and something is missed. Something falls or drops.
I think that's it. As much as the guidelines conversation goes as well, I think a lot of people think that it stops once you've got the brand guidelines, and I think
it's when it starts.
It's ever more important to have awareness that brands evolve and they shouldn't stop at your brand guidelines. And I think that's often missed as well. I think
you're touching on the whole kind of reason for being for Woven, aren't you? It's still tragically in sort of, where are we now, 2025? It's kind of tragic that we're still seeing digital so underinvested, because that's ultimately what it is. You've got a kind of an old school, pre-digital mentality in most of these businesses at the top. CEO, board, marketing director, head of sales, they've all come from this 100 years or 50 years or whatever pre-digital brand. And, as you say, they're willing to spend £15 million a year doing international trade shows or boat shows all over the world. But when it comes to trying to deliver a global digital presence, then you see the budgets are. I mean, I can't even do the maths, but
there's a few decimal places.
There's a lot of decimal places. So, I mean, one thing that you could potentially say, and we've been saying it to people for 20 years in this digital space, is do one less show and put £1.5 million or whatever that equates to into your online digital experience, content, an amazing platform, virtual experiences, the things we could do for those brands with that kind of investment, and it would be perpetual. So they would own those assets, and they'd be available for years potentially, as opposed to a weekend. But that's the sort of thing that we're still not seeing, isn't it? We're still seeing all the money. I've literally had that conversation. Oh, there's no money left for this because we've already done the plan. And it's the same plan we did for the last 20 years. So it's almost like this stuff didn't happen. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got people that are adopting everything as quick as it comes out the door. And those people are, we've often said, even though this industry appears like it moves quickly, the people at the front of that adoption curve are 25 years in front of some of the people towards the back of that adoption curve. Some of the people at the back of that curve don't have a CRM. Some of the people at the back of that curve aren't segmenting data, aren't targeting things properly, aren't even doing real analytics, or they're not doing email automation. They're not doing any of the things that have been available for 20 years. And it's astonishing to walk into businesses, big global brands, and find that almost nothing's changed.
That's kind of why we're here, I guess. We are, I suppose, the strategy and creative element of the team, but there's absolutely a data side. There's, once that brand's been set up, it's almost about operations. How are you going to take that brand out? If you don't have the subscribers, the newsletter. You don't have the people you're actually going to need to send this to, and targeting and messaging that corresponds to that target. What do you do with the brand? It is, people do feel like they've got this thing and they don't know what to do with it. So then it's about execution, how you taking it out to the right people in the right spaces with the right messaging. And then that's a whole nother conversation. So I think we're probably showing off a bit, but we can kind of do both of those things, which is, again, that woven thing. It's not just one thing. It's not just execution. It's not just brand. It's both of those coming together.
Though, as soon as if you just come from a brand-centric positioning, it makes no sense for your, what is for most people their biggest channel for connection, communication, interaction with their audience. You know, it makes no sense strategically to underinvest in that channel compared to physical channels that are fleeting, you know, things that you're just going to burn, burn, throw in the bin into the terms of exhibition stands. So, because it's a brand experience, and I think that's the thing. There's still silos as well. In some instances, the brand team are still siloed from the digital team. And it's almost like they're two separate things.
Totally is. Let alone sales and marketing. You've actually got splits within marketing functions.
It's
30
true.
years ago, maybe, when no one knew what this was, you know, people didn't realize the internet was going to be like where 80% of your brand interactions actually occur. But we know that today. So if
known it for a while.
80% of your brand interactions are going to occur in this channel, why would you not treat that as your most important channel?
I think it's also really cost effective as well if you do it right. I mean, we all love a TV ad, and we all love I especially love a print ad, a press ad. I think they're still amazing pieces of art form. That they're expensive. They have hundreds of people signing them off and analysing every element. You can rack up the bills quite quickly. But if you have a solid set of brand guidelines, if you have someone on the other end in that business who knows what they're doing, then you can roll this stuff out in digital fairly inexpensively, fairly quickly. And
you can also you can segment, you can test. You can't do that quite as, I mean, you could do it with direct mail people. That's where a lot of this stuff came from. But once you sign it off and send it, then maybe you're going to print a couple 100,000 of these. Maybe you're going to print a few million of them, and it's gone. And you're back into that model, aren't you, where, you know, the business kind of sits in a room and decides what the proposition is, and then, you know, we sort of do some version of audience insights and figure out if this message is going to hit that audience, and then we just broadcast it almost, even though we're using different channels, you're still broadcasting a message to a wide audience. And again, that's the old-fashioned paradigm, isn't it? That's how advertising worked. But again, not in the digital age. You've got a much better chance to test stuff. You can test things in social on a very super light basis, super quick, get real definitive answers to what are people responding to, and then potentially roll that back into traditional channels, maybe roll that into a TV ad, roll it into...
Once you know that
but you already know it works.
You know it's good. And you're not spending 500,000 quid or something you're not sure about. A bit of a,
But we saw, looking at social content and looking at video content, you know, YouTube, for instance, working with luxury brands, you see luxury brands effectively just trying to put a TV ad on YouTube. You know, so they'll do their old brand thing. They'll go to the Caribbean, they'll hire a supermodel, they'll go and spend God knows how much, £1 million or more, kind of filming this thing, because it's a TV ad or it's a cinema ad. And then they'll just dump that thing on YouTube and go, chop it up into, here's our new thing. And no one watches it.
I think the way I sort of interact with marketing and advertising, especially these days, is on LinkedIn, you'll see the full 2-minute cut of the latest Uber ad by Mother or Uncommon or whoever. And it's gorgeous, it's beautifully lit, and it's amazingly scripted. And you've got like Robert De Niro on there advertising, and it's superb and it's great. But then you see the 5-second cut and it's like, you've pressed the skip button already. And all of that disappears and goes away. So you have to have a different treatment for that. What does that look like for that? Like, and you wonder if they've spent all this time and effort and money on this big marquee thing, and they've not been able to then segment it into the channel properly. So it sort of loses its impact quite a bit. Well, so that's what Woven is, right? Making brands work beautifully. Premium brands, design conscious brands. It's digital as well as brand strategy and brand articulation.
I think he's trying to bring that big brand thinking, fundamentally big brand thinking, get that right. And we will talk about the woven growth formula, the woven growth formula, in a little while. But that's really the basis of that, isn't it? Is if we don't have the brand's the power source, that's where the energy is, that's where the stories are, that's where the potential is. What we're really trying to do is make sure we get that and capture it and get all of that energy so it's really cooking and there's tons of potential and tons of energy. And then really our job, as you say, the rest of the job then is to release that energy, deliver it across various different channels and to audiences in a way that it moves people. And back to your point, Rich, you know, people feel something. So again, you know, brands, we know it's not an intellectual thing. You know, we don't think through brands consciously in the way that we like to believe we do. You know, we respond to them.
Classic marketer's mistake, that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost, we talk about personality a lot, don't we? Our entire model is built around a personality. This personality has a belief system. It has some core values, you know, it has kind of language and presentation. And that's really what brands are like, isn't it? You know, you bump into a brand and all those, you know, things about body language apply. We make instantaneous decisions about this brand just based on the colors. Is it blue? Is it red? Is it exciting? Is it boring? Is it sophisticated? Instantaneous decisions. And then it's almost kind of up to the brand not to dissuade us of those things. You know, again, if you've not got that clear, if you've not figured out how you want that to feel and what you want that experience to be, then how can you deliver it consistently? So I mean, in a nutshell, that is woven. It's what we exist for, to make brands work beautifully, and that does mean make them work. And as I say, we've gone back to this language of growth. Growth is really what people
performance,
want.
Isn't it? It's performance as much as anything.
But again, performance without the brand, you know, you can waste an awful lot of money trying to push, you know, a story that really doesn't have the kind of impact or the kind of cut through that you need in the marketplace. So just pouring money, as we see, into executional channels like paid search.
Short-term stuff.
With a poor story and a brand that's kind of limping along and not connecting with people, that really is a race to the bottom. That is a race to bankruptcy for brands. Particularly when the investment in fixing that creative and fixing the brand stuff is so small compared to what most people's acquisition budgets look like. So we see people addicted to acquisition. You know, we'll keep spending on acquisition. We realize why. They're on a treadmill. They have to drive the sales, but just a small amount of investment in fixing the
amplifies
the
work that you're going to do.